All right, guys, there are just a couple slides to cover before we get into the next video that's already posted for you. So here's those next couple slides to continue on with the day one neuroanatomy PowerPoint. After you finish watching these couple slides, just go right on to the next video because this is just going to be like 5 minutes or so, 10 minutes max, and then just go on to the next video to continue on with your day one PowerPoint and then start the day two PowerPoint. Okay, so in the last video, we were talking about the functional areas of the cerebrum. Again, when we look at the cerebrum, we see that different parts of the cerebrum have neurons that are responsible for specific functions. The very front of the cerebrum is referred to as the prefrontal cortex. So the very, very front of the cortex is the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is only well developed in humans. Primates in general do tend to have some development of the prefrontal cortex, but humans are the only ones that have fully developed prefrontal cortex. So if you keep that in mind, everything that we use the prefrontal cortex for kind of makes sense. The prefrontal cortex is responsible for really everything that makes us human. All the stuff that sets humans apart from other animals. So all aspects of personality, right? Personality is your general way of looking at the world, like your base reactions to things that go on in the world, things that happen to you, how you look at, your day, like just your base personality. Also behavior. So like decision making, how you should behave in specific situations, judgment, understanding that when you walk into the classroom, you behave one way, and that, might be different from the way that you behave if you are, at a football game, which is different from the way that you would behave if you're at church. Understanding what's appropriate in different situations and choosing to act appropriately is a function of the prefrontal cortex. Also, our higher mental faculties, so all of our intellect, essentially, our ability to learn the stuff that you're learning right now is because of your prefrontal cortex. Our prefrontal cortex also stores our memories long term. There's a lot of different parts of the brain. The limbic system is involved in memory. Memory is pretty complex. We have to first form memories, right, as things happen to us, and then we have to store those memories long term. The prefrontal cortex is responsible for, or is one of the things that's responsible for storing those memories. So stores present and past sensory experiences, as well as emotional information. And it uses that information to help in decision making based on past experiences, which is how we make decisions very frequently, right? You learn as you're growing up, hey, I get a good response from people if I behave this way. I get a bad response from people if I behave this way. Or, you see something happening to other people and you say, oh, wow, I don't want that to happen to me. So I'm not going to, make those bad choices. All of those kind of memories and experiences are stored in the prefrontal cortex. And again, we access those when we're making decisions. The prefrontal cortex, when we see like damage to the prefrontal cortex, you generally will see a lot of personality changes in the person. They'll start behaving inappropriately. They might have been, really responsible person, and all of a sudden they stop taking care of themselves. They're making, really rash decisions. Maybe they get fired from their job. Maybe they go blow all their money. Just complete changes in personality and kind of a breakdown of decision making when there are lesions in the prefrontal cortex. We'll talk about that in the next video. Wernicke's area. Wernicke's area has parts that are in the parietal and the temporal lobes. So if you look kind of like here at this blue area, the way that it kind of curves around, so the parietal lobe, and then it curves out like laterally into the temporal lobe as well. Wernicke's area is responsible for comprehension of what we're hearing or comprehension of what we are reading. So under, like when someone's talking to you, if you can hear them, right, you hear the sound, but you can't make sense of what they're saying, then your auditory cortex is probably fine. It's Wernicke's area that's not functioning correctly. And then same thing with like reading, right? If you can see perfectly fine, but you can't comprehend what you're reading, then again, that could be a Wernicke's area issue. If you look at this bottom picture, this is showing you Broca's area and Wernicke's area. Broca's area, remember, Broca's area is the motor speech area. So the motor speech area is where we control all of the complex contractions that are involved with speech, right? Creating speech. These black lines that you see, like curving between the two areas, those are showing you tracts or white matter. So white matter is the axons where we send signals back and forth. So you can see that there's a lot of white matter or a lot of tracts that connect Broca's area with Wernicke's area, because those two things are very closely related to each other. Think about when you have a conversation with someone, right? There's this give and take that's involved with you first comprehending what you're hearing and then you speaking in response. So those two areas are, again, they're really closely associated with each other, and they kind of function, together. The auditory cortex and auditory association area. Remember, for a lot of our senses, we have a primary area and then an association area. The primary area is where the raw sensory data first comes in. The association area is where we process it, where we make sense of it. Our auditory areas are in our temporal lobes, which, to remember that, it kind of makes sense, like your ears are on the side of your head, the temporal lobes on the side of the cerebrum, right? So from right by your ears is the temporal lobe and our auditory cortex. The primary auditory cortex is in the very top gyrus, this first gyrus here of the temporal lobe. So the superior temporal gyrus, this is where we receive auditory stimuli. So just the raw sensory information, the fact that you hear a sound, kind of how loud it is, the pitch, that raw info comes in to the auditory cortex. The auditory association area is kind of almost surrounds, it's below and behind the primary cortex a little bit, so like below like this and then kind of back behind it like this, is the auditory association area. So the auditory association area, again, is where we process what it is that we're hearing. So for example, if a police car is driving up behind you and their siren is going, right? You hear their rear, rear, rear. That raw data about what you're hearing is going to go into the auditory cortex. When it goes to the auditory cortex, your brain knows you're hearing something, but it does not understand that that's a police siren and you need to pull over. You're not comprehending that yet. It's once the information is sent to the association area, that association area is what allows you to comprehend what you're hearing. Oh, that's a police siren. Like, I recognize that pitch. I recognize the way that sound repeats. That's a siren. Okay. So that is it for the auditory areas.